the home of Paul Bunyan and his Ox Babe, the land of 1,000 lakes, Minnesota, a sportsman's paradise. Hello, I'm Paul Page, and we're near the headwaters of the Mississippi, a little town called Brainerd, Minnesota. It's where sportsmen come to play. But today we won't see them angling for bass. Today we'll see the motorized sportsmen of the Sports Car Club of America, ready to race on Brainerd International Raceway, a 3-mile, 10-turn challenging road circuit. And to meet the drivers and teams we'll be watching, let's go to Steve Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Page. You know, if Paul Bunyan is still looking over this countryside, and the locals will tell you that he is, he's mighty proud of Brainerd International Raceway because it's a Paul Bunyan-sized racetrack. 3 miles long, 10 turns, and an infield you could graze 2,000 head of blue oxes in. We're here to bring you the SCCA Trans Am Road Racing Championship, and it's a power-packed field of domestic and imported cars. On the outside of the front row is Elliott Forbes Robinson in a newly developed 944 Porsche Turbo. And Elliott's just now buckling up. You know, the last few races, the fans have enjoyed watching you and Scott Pruitt just beat on each other from start to finish. But on a big, kind of scary racetrack like this, is that same thing going to happen?
I think we're going to have a really close race, Dave. I think that this track is going to breed that kind of thing because you're able to draft up on the straight, which you might lose in the infield. And I think we're going to see as close a race as we've seen all year with Pete Halsmer in there with us.
Absolutely. Have a safe ride.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Elliott Forbes Robinson on the outside. Well, that means that somebody else sits on the pole, right? And that somebody else is the man that I was just talking about, and that is Scott Pruitt in the turbocharged Mercure automobile. And here is Scott, Northern California. And Scott, Elliott Forbes Robinson thinks this will be the same kind of race you guys have been enjoying, just to add each other hammer and tong.
Well, we've had some great races so far. I mean, Detroit, Portland, even last week at Mid-Ohio. Unfortunately, he had those problems, and I came through with the win. But it's been tough. I mean, all the turbo cars have been run very, very strong, and the SCCA is doing their point to try and limit our advantage, or so-called advantage. But I think things are going real well for us, and hopefully we'll have some good luck here today.
Okay, Paul, we're just about ready for a start down here.
Well, Steve, back in the second row in a car identical to Scott Pruitt, his teammate Pete Halsmer, another Jack Roush prepared machine. And Halsmer and the rest of the 21-car field will accept the challenge of the run here at Brainerd International Raceway, a giant, magnificently prepared facility. 3 miles around, 10 turns, very, very flat, no elevation changes to speak of at all, and plenty of runoff room, so it makes for some incredibly fast racing.
Earlier this morning in warm-ups, before the overcast had burned off, Elliott Forbes Robinson gave us a look at this course through the windscreen of his number 11 Porsche. Elliott, the 1982 Trans Am champion, as we've already told you, will start in the front row. And Paul, here comes Elliott out of the pit area.
Well, he puts the power to that Porsche coming out about halfway down this long main straightaway. And long is perhaps an understatement because it's nearly 1 mile long. And as you can see, it is nice and wide. And as they come to the end of the main straightaway, there's a nice sweeper to challenge them.
There is, Paul. You can take this virtually flat out, maybe a little feather footing required. It's probably the most intimidating of all the turns of this racetrack because of the sheer speed. In the case of Elliott's, over 175 miles per hour.
It's one of those turns that the car literally gets up and tiptoes around and then picks up a shorter straightaway and heads into another fast right-hand bend that is turn number 2. Again, very little change in power. Just feather the machine here, don't touch the gear, and come out as fast as you can.
And here we can see turn number 3 up ahead, the short chute that leads up at the top of your screen to turn number 4. So again, as you've described it perfectly, it's a delicate little balance of car and driver through this section of the course.
Now, though, EFR will have to grab a gear. In fact, he comes down 2 gears to make it through turn 3. Onto the brakes, try to get a nice smooth line. This is a place that you can lose time, but have very little opportunity to make it up.
Here, Elliott was just completing that little short chute leading down into the left-hander, turn number 4. On and off the throttle, gently steering that car to the left and down another very short little chute.
There's turn 5, then you see a short straightaway, and turn 6 makes that bend back to the left. Again, we come to the onboard camera and get the view that EFR sees as he comes around 5. Again, feathering the engine through the apex, and then trying to place his position back over to the right so that he can get into turn 6 smoothly.
And here we see exactly how Elliott Forbes Robinson gets through turn 6. The infield here is one giant campground, and these turns 6, 7, and 8, the most popular viewing areas.
Directly below, that is turn number 8, and then a short little straightaway. Barely enough time, really, to set the car for turn number 9. Nice smooth exit there, because there's another long straightaway. We are with the FR. This is turn 7. You see, he pitches the car hard, keeps it way over to the left, and then sweeps on into turn 8. Lets it slide out to the outside. That right-hander ahead is turn number 9, very much like 8. Again, down touches the apex. Key corner because there's a long straightaway ahead.
And at the end of that straightaway, right here is the sweeping right-hander they call turn number 10, the final turn on this circuit. In warm-ups, qualifying, preliminary action, we've seen more spins there, Paul, than anywhere else.
And obviously, because of the nearly mile-long straightaway, it's the key corner on the circuit. Looking out the front window, there's the new scoring tower they're building here at Brainerd International. And we watch EFR as he's followed by his teammate Bruce Jenner down this tremendously long straightaway with speeds up about 170 to 180 miles an hour. Brainerd International Raceway will see 33 laps, 99 miles.
And we'd like to thank Bruce Jenner and Elliott Forbes Robinson for an exciting ride. Well, there you see them, the 2 and 3 cars. Those are the team cars. Jack Roush built them, Scott Pruitt on the pole behind him, Halsmer. Alongside in the front row also is Elliott Forbes Robinson in the car number 11. And that Porsche has performed as well here as it has all season. Paul Newman on the outside of the second row, Paul, was the quickest car of all of them in early morning practice, even quicker than Elliott Forbes Robinson and Scott Pruitt. Maybe one to watch.
You may have noticed the 4th row, Jim Fitzgerald and Bruce Jenner. Now, Fitzgerald is a driving instructor. In fact, he candidly refers to himself as the instructor to the stars because he has so many actors and, in fact, actresses that like to go to his driving schools. But I'll tell you one thing, he is capable of showing you how to drive a car very, very quickly. We have 2 onboard cameras here today. The first one, you've already met him, Elliott Forbes Robinson, car number 11, will carry one of the onboard cameras, and the other will be in car number 4. Deborah Gregg's machine. She's starting back in the 12th starting position.
And Deborah is in a very powerful V8 Mercury Capri prepared by Jack Roush, one of the cars that Scott Pruitt drove in the Trans Am Series last year so successfully. We'll be back with the start of the Bendix Trans Am here in Brainerd, Minnesota, right after this.
We're back at Brainerd International for the SCCA Bendix Trans Am. And on the outside of the second row, car 33 is Paul Newman. For him, this is a new machine, and earlier Steve took a look at it.
This is last year's Paul Newman Nissan 300ZX Turbo. Now, a rather short wheelbase as compared to the competition, just about 92 inches. Well, the crew for this season thought, we need a new car with a longer wheelbase. So still, it's a Turbo 300ZX, only now it's the 2+2 version, which brings them up to about 99 inches wheelbase measured from the center of the axles. Now, has that paid off? Well, this is only the 3rd race, so they're still developing the car. But according to our Escort radar guns, this is the fastest car down the straightaway, about 181 miles per hour. But it's also the fastest car at the middle of turn 1 and the fastest car exiting turn 1 of the whole bunch. So apparently, Paul Newman and his longer wheelbase car are getting along just fine.
And what does Paul Newman think of the new long wheelbase car?
Well, the short wheelbase gave up a lot of high-speed stability, but we've got it here now. It's going to be terrific.
And Paul's teammate, Jim Fitzgerald, number 38, is driving the older model, shorter wheelbase car. Now the field aligned, 21 machines coming off that final turn and ready to roll toward the green flag. Once again, there is Paul Newman's car, number 33, the outside of the second row. Elliott Forbes Robinson and Scott Pruitt on the front row. The green flag flies, and we are racing. 33 laps, 99 miles ahead.
And already, Paul, it is Paul Newman making a move on the inside. The red, white, and blue car is challenging Scott Pruitt. Here we look to the windshield of the 944 Porsche, Elliott Forbes Robinson, and by him comes Newman on the very first lap. Newman leads them into turn number 1. Incredible horsepower.
At the same time. That's Scott Pruitt just in front, who drops into second place. EFR drops back into third.
These guys have got to be a little shocked to see Newman extend that advantage here in the very first few turns of this race. In second position, the yellow and white car, number 2, Scott Pruitt, the Trans Am Series points leader. Just behind him, the Porsche that started on the outside. That's Elliott Ford Robinson, car number 40. And how about Jim Fitzgerald, Paul? He's not doing too bad in the older Newman car, number 38.
Fitzgerald has pulled up now in the 38 machine to come up just behind this car. You can see Paul Newman is driving away from the field as Scotty Pruitt rides in second place. He stabs the brakes. EFR cocks the wheel over, continues in pursuit from third, and Jim Fitzgerald is just behind, running in fourth right now. Here comes the leader, Paul Newman through, then Pruitt, then EFR, then Fitzgerald, and the rest of the field wind their way through as we're in the early stages of the SCCA Bendix Trans Am here from Brainerd International.
A race developing here for the fourth position. The red, white, and blue car, that's Jim Fitzgerald. The older Nissan automobile, the white Chevrolet. Just behind him, Jim Durhag. A lot of fans here for Durhag. He's from Minnesota and is second in the Trans Am points. Only Scott Pruitt has more, and a lot more, I might add.
Let's look a little further back in the field now. The 81 car, Paul Gentilozzi being challenged by the 42 machine of Bruce Jenner. And that number 3 car is Pete Halsmer, who is now 9th. He started second row.
And that may have something to do with Paul Newman's terrific start as he was kind of pushing Pete Halsmer back into the pack. But the race for the second position is terrific. As we expected, Scott Pruitt now has to get off the throttle and let Elliott Ford Robinson the Porsche down lower into turn number 1. But Pruitt comes back as they exit 1.
Turbo power paying off on that long straightaway for EFR. Scotty Pruitt running in the car right behind him, that yellow and white number 2 machine. We look at the onboard camera and look way, way ahead is Paul Newman. But now EFR begins to close that distance just a bit. Cranks her down inside the right-hander, picks up a few inches on Paul Newman. And while racing is perceived as a high-speed sport, this gives you a great opportunity to see what it truly is. You gain a few inches here, a few feet there. Maybe you catch up, maybe you don't, but it is all done very carefully and as smoothly as possible.
And that little chirping sound we hear from the EFR Porsche, that's the turbo when he shifts gear. Now here's a terrific race going on for that fourth position. Jim Fitzgerald, the 38 Nissan car, just behind him, the Privateer Chevrolet entry, number 40, Jim Durhag. And in 6 is the bright yellow Chevrolet, number 8, Les Lindley.
Durhag dropped to the inside there. Looked like he was going to try to put a move on Fitzgerald, but there just wasn't enough room, and so that battle for fourth place continues. Fitzgerald is still running in fourth.
Paul, we should mention the driver of car number 42, Bruce Jenner, is not the decathlete, even though both of them do race. This Bruce Jenner started racing in his native New Zealand, now lives in Del Mar, California, and operates this team of 2 Porsches out of Charlotte, North Carolina.
And while you talk about him, Peter Halsmer works him, cuts to the inside, and gets around Bruce Jenner and picks up 7th place. So Halsmer now tries to work his way back up to the position he started in. Remember, he qualified 3rd quick, but then he dropped back at the start. Now he comes around left. Lindley picks up 6th place, and Bruce Jenner says, why don't I try that line as well? It worked for Halsmer, and so he just slides right on past, and he picks up 7th.
Now the yellow Chevrolet, Les Lindley, that is a V6 engine. He is no match for the turbocharged cars of the V8s down the straight, but in the tighter portions of the course, that car handles very well. He may pick a little of that back up.
Well, you've seen how long and how wide open Brainerd International is. So this is really a course for turbo power. If you're normally aspirated here, you're really going to have some problems trying to keep up.
Due to his poor start, one man out there may be driving harder than any other, and that's Pete Halsmer, the number 3 Mercure. We saw him last season win at Road America in a tremendous battle with Wally Dallenbach in the Chevrolet, who ultimately won the series.
There's Jim Fitzgerald currently running in 4th. Right behind him, the 40 car, Jim Durhag, and Halsmer has moved in now to do battle with these 2. Fitzgerald occupies 4th, but it's really a 3-car fight for 4th at the moment.
And the complexion of all of that is going to change, I believe, when they hit that front straightaway, because that's where Pete Halsmer will have the advantage, that turbo horsepower. He's able to make a move right there and pick up some position. But out in front, as he has been since turn 1 of this race, is Paul Newman. And this course, long and flat, very suitable to that Nissan you see running just up in front of Elliott Ford Robinson. It has a bit more turbo lag, Paul, than any of the other cars. So on a wide open course like this, Newman's enjoying himself out there.
Well, you see Paul Newman accelerate away on this long straightaway here. Now let's take a look at straightaway speeds. We have that opportunity right here as they come through the radar trap. Newman at 176, and EFR comes through almost 10 miles an hour slower. So Paul Newman really making up time. That long wheelbase car working for him on the tremendously long straightaway between the last and the first turn here at Brainerd.
So Newman, according to our radar gun anyway, enjoying a tremendous horsepower advantage. That's the only thing that could make that kind of difference. And suddenly, Paul, I think he's bobbled a bit there.
It looks like he hesitates. Newman slows down just a bit. That 33 car, it is in the lead. And look at EFR close down. Now will he get past him? Elliott Ford Robinson just behind. You look ahead, there's Paul Newman. That's the closest he's been all day. And EFR says, this is the chance. Here's an opportunity to get around. But Newman seems to have come back to speed.
Oh, you can bet Elliott picked up on that moment when Newman's car suddenly just quit accelerating. Paul somehow either got it back in gear or back on the throttle and is now trying to hold off the 944 turbo Porsche that is running in second position. With the straightaway advantage the Nissan has, Elliott knows he better get right on his bumper here.
Two different ways to spend a Minnesota afternoon. Quietly fishing at the Cross Lake Dam, enjoying the tranquility, or at Brainerd International Raceway at full chat behind the wheel of a Trans Am car. You're on board with Deborah Gregg. She's riding in 12th place now, but trying to maintain her position in the points.
She is fifth in points, Paul, but had an anxious moment earlier. She almost didn't make it to the grid because the jack brace in her car broke off as they were letting it down. It crashed to the ground. No damage to the car, but they wanted to weld that mount back on in case they have to make a pit stop. They'll be able to jack the car up.
Now, pit stops not anticipated in a race of this distance, but the team wants to make sure that the car is 100% for competition. We go back on board. Deborah Gregg's car. She's riding in 12th place right now, trying to maintain position.
As we switch back over to Robinson's car, let's take a look at the standings. Paul Newman with the Nissan is leading it. Robinson Porsche second, Scott Pruitt, Mercour in third, Jim Fitzgerald in Nissan in fourth, and Jim Durhag in a Chevrolet. So quite a mix of makes. Let's check our speed trap as Paul Newman comes into turn number 6, and the speed reads out at 68 miles per hour. So turn 6, one of the slower corners on the racetrack.
Paul Newman, the Nissan, leads it, but EFR has been able to close down behind Newman. You saw earlier how Newman slowed, and EFR pulled down behind him. At the same time, as we take a look at Elliott Ford Robinson, right behind this car, the Porsche, is the Mercour of Scotty Pruitt. First, second, and third are all running right together on the race course. There they are, nose to tail with one another as they come once again onto this tremendously long straightaway.
Now let's see if Paul Newman still enjoys that speed advantage as he accelerates down the 1 mile long straightaway towards our radar gun. Yes, he does. Just driving away from second place. Elliott Ford Robinson extending that lead, and his speed will read out at 176 miles an hour, 11 miles an hour faster than Elliott in the second spot.
So both those two cars maintaining their relative speeds on the long straightaway. And as we watch the 33 car of Newman through the first two turns, which are wide sweeping turns to the right, that long wheelbase car seems to be paying off. He gets to those corners very well. But as we go back on board with Elliott Ford Robinson, you can see that in this section of the course, the turbo is paying off on the Porsche, and he's able to close with the Nissan.
Well, also, the Porsche, Paul, enjoys a 50-pound weight advantage. And look at Elliott Ford Robinson. Tries him on the inside. There was not enough room there as Newman chops him off. But I was going to say he has a 50-pound weight advantage, and that helps in the twisty parts of this course. Also, less turbo lag with the Porsche motor than the Nissan engine.
So Paul Newman leads it. At the same time, back in the field, his teammate, there he is, the 38 car of Jim Fitzgerald, is trying to hold on to 5th place. The 40 car of Jim Durhag is up and challenging.
And that Chevrolet of Durhag's is a well-proven automobile, as is the yellow Camaro you just saw back there. Those are a V8 and V6 respectively, and they're not going to break down, Paul. They're not nearly as complicated, as sophisticated as the turbocharged machines. They'll be there at the finish, and they challenge the turbo cars to join them.
So this is the fight for 5th place as we watch Jim Fitzgerald hold off Durhag. And then just behind that fight is Bruce Jenner as he tries to hold off Les Lindley in a battle for 7th place. So the front of the field all running together, and what has turned out to be a wonderful race here in the Bendix Trans Am.
in 5th, 6th, and 7th. 3 different makes of automobiles. Jim Fitzgerald and the Nissan in 5th. And it's that kind of competition that has kept the Trans Am Series so popular with the fans. In fact, it's the longest continuously running road racing series in America.
Remember that this 38 car, the Nissan of Fitzgerald, while it appears to be similar to that of the leader, Paul Newman, is physically different in that it's a much shorter wheelbase car. And that's a disadvantage on these wide open sweeping turns here at Brainerd International. So Fitzgerald currently occupying 5th place, and he tries to hold off Jim Durhag in the 40 car. Now Durhag closes down in, sets up right on the rear bumper of Fitzgerald. This is a battle for 5th place, and a good little fight there. At the same time, nice fight for 7th. There is Bruce Jenner in the 42 car trying to hold off the number 8 machine of Les Lindley. Lindley comes up behind Jenner, tries to close in just behind him, got his bumper right in there, tries to dart inside on the outside of the course. Now, can he put the nose down inside? No, Jenner holds him off again.
Talk about a contrast in automobiles, the turbocharged Porsche and the American V6 and that bright yellow Camaro. And Paul, look at this. Jim Durhag has passed Jim Fitzgerald in the Nissan to take over the 5th position. So Fitzgerald is now at 6th, and here is Elliott Forbes Robinson, and he is making up some ground on Newman. He goes and he is around Paul Newman. We have our new leader.
For the first time in the race, Steve Evans, a new leader as Newman drops back to 2nd place, and EFR in the Porsche is out in front. But look at this, a tremendous fight. 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. You can throw a blanket over him because Scotty Pruitt closes in right behind Paul Newman now. Now Newman on the long straight, picks up that tremendous power of his turbo, and Newman goes back into the lead.
Oh, yeah, 10 miles an hour advantage to Newman. But now, as we get back on the trickier parts of this circuit, let's see if EFR can close it up again. Newman with about a 4-car length advantage. Now make that 3, 2, and soon to be 1.
Under braking, Paul Newman is closed by EFR. We take a look as he comes to the inside. The Porsche has been better in this section, and EFR comes by. Scotty Pruitt puts a nose inside Paul Newman as well. Newman closes down a bit, doesn't totally shut the door. Now Pruitt has a chance. Pruitt tries to pick up some power, but the turbo on the Nissan is far superior here, and then Pruitt just darts to the inside, picks up Paul Newman, and picks up 2nd place.
Paul Newman is too good a race car driver to give up that easily, Paul. There's something going on with that automobile that we don't know about.
So for the first time today, it's a clear view out in front of Elliott Forbes Robinson, and Paul Newman, fighting a car with obviously some problems, has dropped back into 3rd place. And look at this, right behind Newman is the number 3 machine of Pete Halsberg. He started 3rd, he dropped back to 9th, now he works his way up to 4th, and as he sails around Paul Newman, he takes 3rd place. So Halsberg fighting his way up through the field, while Paul Newman fights with an obvious problem.
That's right. He has been pushed back to the 4th position, where now Jim Durhag in the Chevrolet Camaro will take a shot at him. There is something gone awry with that automobile. It could be tires. It could be brakes. His problems are in the back part of the course. He is dominant. Newman is coming in. Yes, into the pit area comes the Nissan of Paul Newman.
So Gene Crow and the Nissan team now waiting for this car as it pulls in. They're the finest group in the sport. They can do magnificent things on these cars as long as it is not too serious. But Paul Newman is approaching the pits rather slow. There the crew comes over the wall, ready to go to work on that Nissan. And it appears that Paul Newman has radioed for a change of tires. We'll be back with more from Brainerd right after this. We're back at Brainerd International. I'm Paul Page with Steve Evans, and you're on board with Elliott Forbes Robinson, who has taken the lead from Paul Newman, while Newman headed for the pits. Pruitt is 2nd, Halsberg rides in 3rd place, Durhag is 4th, and Jim Fitzgerald is 5th. But Elliott Forbes Robinson is out in front. When Paul Newman's car began to slow, he took over the lead, and Newman headed for the pits.
Well, Paul Newman came into his pits and took on some tires. Just a second, let's listen to Gene Crow.
Look at the brakes.
He says it seems like there's no front-wheel brakes.
Right. You want to pull the front tires.
So Newman had a feeling a tire was flat. They came in here, took it off, checked the inflation, and it was just fine. He also did seem to have trouble with the gearbox, getting it in gear and getting the car going. So there may be some compounded problems with that particular car. But this man right here is busy still talking to Paul as they try to diagnose it and get it fixed.
So the crew tries to analyze the radio transmissions from Paul Newman, who has dropped well back now. But here's his teammate, the 38 car, Jim Fitzgerald, is in a fight for 5th place. Bruce Jenner is just behind, and then that bright yellow number 8 machine of Les Lindley.
Well, Bruce Jenner just saw a lot of bright yellow flash by as Les Lindley has now passed Jenner and taken over his position.
So Lindley, despite the fact on this long circuit at Brainerd International, running with a disadvantage of not having a turbocharger, is doing a magnificent piece of driving, as now he pulls up to the inside of Jim Fitzgerald and tries to challenge that turbocharged Nissan. Now, Lindley certainly knows that if he's going to get past, he has to do it in these, the tighter sections of the course. Lindley, like so many, has a love affair with Chevrolet, and earlier, Steve took a look at the Chevys in this race.
Anybody who tries to tell you that Chevrolet won't be a force in this year's Trans Am, well, don't believe them. I mean, there's not a lot of corporate types around, but as always, Chevy's customers are out carrying the banner. Now, Les Lindley bought this car from Chevrolet. It's the very machine Wally Dallenbach drove last year. It has the V6 power plant, so it's allowed to be a good deal lighter than the competition. Also, it's lighter on the front end, may handle a little better. Now, had Chevrolet Corporate continued to race in the Trans Am this year, the car that they would have fielded is right next to Lindley, and that's the white number 40 machine. Jim Durhag bought it. It's the last of the protofab cars that was built for the factory but never run. Now, he has the V8 engine, but Brainerd is his home track, and he says on a hot sunny day like we've got here that he and Les Lindley will run very well. The hot weather is to their advantage and the turbo Porsches and turbo Mercures disadvantage.
Well, he's definitely right, because both of those cars are running in the top 10. We're looking at the fight for fifth, and there is that Chevrolet, the yellow number 8 of Lindley. As Ilavo, he loses it almost into the wall, but gets her back under control as he tried to challenge Jim Fitzgerald.
Well, that was just a beautiful four-wheel drift. Beautiful for us, a little scary for Lindley. He did a fine job of driving there, but he lost a couple of car lengths to Fitzgerald.
Well, Lindley saw a lot of landscape out the front of that car for a few moments. Back to the front of the field. Elliott Forbes Robinson is out in front. That's a slower car, a back marker that he's trying to catch at the moment. And just behind him is Scott Pruitt in the number 2 machine. Now, remember, last year at this race, Pruitt broke in the closing laps. So he really has a score to settle with this circuit. And he would love to get out and get around Elliott Forbes Robinson. Now EFR closes down behind the 47 machine of Michael Keogh, running in last place. And he hopes that Keogh sees him in the mirrors. Indeed he does. And the first 2 cars string their way now through the back markers in the field.
This battle right here is the one the press and the fans have all been talking about. This man, Elliott Forbes Robinson, now sees in his mirrors the man he expected to see sooner or later. Scott Pruitt and that Jack Roush prepared Mercure XR4 TI. 2 very evenly matched automobiles. Now, as they sweep out of turn number 10, we will get a chance to see how they compare as far as top-end horsepower is concerned, to see if either one of them has an advantage. Elliott puts it into top gear and is closing down on our radar trap ball, and we'll get a speed reading on both automobiles. For Elliott Forbes Robinson in the Porsche, the speed reads out at 167 miles an hour. For Pruitt in the Mercure, 164.
So Elliott Forbes Robinson getting a little better straightaway speed, though not nearly the advantage that Paul Newman had when he rolled through the same area while his car was in contention for the lead. Behind them, this battle for 5th place as the 38 car, that's Jim Fitzgerald in the Nissan, is trying to hold off Les Lindley, the number 8 car, the Chevrolet, as Lindley just simply blows past Fitzgerald and picks up 5th. Now, I'm not sure what happened there. And look at that. Lindley almost loses it again. That's the second time we've watched that car get squirrely. I'm not sure what advantage Lindley used to get past Fitzgerald so quickly. But when he did it very decisively. So Lindley now occupies 5th, and Jim Fitzgerald has dropped back into 6th place in his Nissan. Now, at this moment, there is one quiet place here on the track. It's over in the pit area, and Steve is there.
Not exactly an action-packed pit wall, is it? You don't see any fuel storage because there's no planned pit stop. So why then do some of the teams send down their mechanics and a couple of tires and some tools? Well, it's because they're professionals, for one thing, and they want to run every lap of the race they can to continue developing the car, honing their driver's skill, and in some cases, a meager few points earned here at the end of the year could make the difference in winning a championship or not. But basically, if you pit during a 100-miler, your chances of winning it are slim and none. Your chances of finding something else, developing the car, who knows?
And while the crews are watching, they hope that these cars never see the pits. Here comes Elliott Forbes Robinson past once again, 167 miles an hour, running a very consistent race in the lead. We'll be back with more from Brainerd, Minnesota, right after this.
If you tuned in hoping to see some close auto racing competition, how about this? That's the 3 leaders. First and third, those are Turbo Mercurs. Yet second is Elliott Forbes Robinson in a Porsche. And for Chevy fans, they're running fourth and fifth. They're Hack and Lindley.
It has, in fact, been a wonderful fight at the front of the field here as we watch the number 2 car of Scotty Pruitt. He leads it. That's the Porsche of Elliott Forbes Robinson, number 11, sitting just back. Now, earlier, you heard Jack Roush, the team manager for the team of Scotty Pruitt, talk about the tactics here at Brainerd. He thought that the Elliott Forbes Robinson car started with a little softer rubber compound, giving them a little more stick, but apparently hoping that that might change. Well, now, let's go down into the pits for the number 11 car with Steve Evans. Steve?
We'll do a little counterpoint here. We heard what Jack Roush had to say, and I'll ask Max Crawford, who's Elliott Forbes Robinson's crew chief. Max, Roush seems to think that they're running harder tires than you are, and that was kind of the game plan, to hang back until maybe Elliott's tires went away.
We're running hard compound as well because of the heat.
Does Elliott say anything to the crew? Is the car performing properly? He feels all right about it?
Well, I've been watching his lap times. I think he's probably conserving the car. Elliott's very smart.
All right. Yes, indeed. He is very smart. So that looks like the final line here is that maybe they both have the same tires on, and everybody's waiting for those last few laps to really show their stuff.
So Max Crawford with their tactics for the Porsche as we watch out of the front window of Elliott Forbes Robinson's Porsche. He is in second place, and he's been maintaining his position just behind Scott Pruitt after Scott Pruitt got past, and we've got a car really smoking there.
That's right. That is the number 53 car of Bill Doyle. He is in the 9th position and showing some smoking on that engine. There is Deborah Gregg. I'm sure she sees that smoke and hopes that he's down on power, going to allow her to take this car we see right now back up into that position. Boy, it is really smoking badly now, Bill Doyle.
Well, while on one hand, the Bill Doyle 53 car is down on power, Debbie really has to be careful when she closes in, because that blue smoke tells you that there is also oil being laid down there. And as we look out the front window of her number 4 machine, you can see the blue smoke drifting past. She has to make sure that that doesn't turn into oil and therefore into a spin. We're back to the front of the field. 3 cars running right together. Pruitt, then EFR, and then Peter Halsmer.
Just formation flying here, and EFR, of course, the driver with the most pressure on him. He's got Scott Pruitt trying to drive away from him. Behind him, he's got Pete Halsmer trying to get around him. But as I said before, Elliott Forbes Robinson, a 20-year veteran. He's driven NASCAR, Grand National cars, endurance cars. He's been to Le Mans. He's been to virtually every track in the world, and he is just Mr. Cool.
Well, you heard Max Crawford earlier mention that EFR is very good at saving the car. Well, if that's what he cares to do, he is in the position to do it now, because the pressure is on Scott Pruitt, the car just ahead, the leader of the race. EFR can relax a little bit, just pressure Pruitt. He's going through the slower section. That's the radar gun at turn 6, still maintaining about 68 miles an hour, which is where they have been for the last several laps. But EFR can be gentler with the car than the leader can. At the moment, though, he's under a lot of pressure from Pete Halsmer.
He is indeed. And Paul, thinking back to the past where Scott Pruitt took the lead, he took it awful easily. I wonder if Max Crawford isn't right, that Elliott just said, okay, young man, lead for a while. Let's see what kind of stuff you've got. And here they come off of turn number 10. Very important to have the RPMs up and get a real launch down this near 1 mile long straightaway. This is a 3-car drag race, Paul.
And it is an area of the track where the Porsche has shown superior performance. Remember, there is a weight difference. And here we see it again. Here is the Porsche. As he lays the power down, the turbo picks it up, and EFR is going to get to the turn first, and he hangs on. So EFR goes back into the lead. Pruitt back into second place.
Well, impossible to say what's going through these drivers' minds, Paul, but I think we were right about that. I think Elliott let Pruitt lead for a while just to kind of test him and see how much he had maybe for the last few laps of the race. But this man back out in front, Elliott Forbes Robinson, Denver, North Carolina.
Well, you know, the rhythm that a driver uses around a track is very important to him personally. And maybe, while he may not have wanted to lead, he didn't like the rhythm that Pruitt was setting up. And so he decided, I'm going to get back in front, set my own pace, something that's comfortable for me, and that will save the car.
You And, you know, Elliott Forbes Robinson thinks an awful lot of Scott Pruitt as a driver. He really believes that his talents are world class. When Pruitt first became involved in big league automobile racing, you'd always see him kind of hanging around with EFR, almost like he was his mentor or his hero, because Elliott's such a calming influence on a young driver. 68 miles per hour, how steady can they get?
Well, I'll tell you, I had a chance to drive against Scott Pruitt at Long Beach, California, and he is incredibly smooth. He really knows how to use all of the racetrack while at the same time saving the car. So he is one very skilled driver, and very early in his career, definitely someone to watch.
And moving over like a gentleman is Paul Gentilozzi in the Oldsmobile on the left-hand side of your screen, because he wants to watch this race just like we are, I think, Paul. Elliott Forbes Robinson in the lead. Oh, and the 53 car, he is still smoking, but not as badly as before.
Well, apparently, whatever was leaking out, well, there it is once again. So apparently, this is only happening in the turns. The centrifugal force is throwing the oil onto probably a header pipe or something and causing it to burn off there. Now, because of that, Deborah Gregg has to be very careful while she's in pursuit. You saw her fight the wheel against the skid there just a moment ago, and she has to watch for oil coming off the back of Bill Doyle's car.
Deborah running in the 10th spot. This man, Elliott Forbes Robinson, in position number 1 in a Porsche partially sponsored by Deborah's Brumas Porsche in Jacksonville, Florida. The smiling Elliott in the headshot there. He's gritting his teeth. Now, and look at this, Paul Page. Scott Pruitt, the Turbo McCord, has come around Elliott Forbes Robinson. He outbraked him.
He does it again, outbraking with a real gutsy move, comes on the inside, forces his way past the Porsche, and once again picks up the lead. So now, twice, EFR has had the lead, and this is the second time that we've seen Scotty Pruitt out in front. The only other leader of this race has been Paul Newman, who led in the early going. So Pruitt back in the top position. He is being chased by Elliott Forbes Robinson, but Peter Halsmer is still very definitely in this fight.
And unlike the earlier pass, there's no way Elliott Forbes Robinson let Pruitt by. Pruitt just took control.
That great sleepy old river, the Mississippi, begins its run down to New Orleans and out into the Gulf of Mexico up here in Minnesota at the headwaters of the Mississippi. Just a few miles away from Brainerd International Raceway. I'm Paul Page with Steve Evans, and we're back at the Trans Am, where Scotty Pruitt is back in the lead, being chased by EFR, then Peter Halsmer, Jim Durhag, and Les Lindley.
As they cross the start-finish line stripe, this time that will be going on to lap number 25, right there, the scheduled 33. And Scott Pruitt now starting to display of maybe a little more top-end speed down this 1 mile straightaway than the Porsche of Elliott Forbes Robinson. Our escort radar gun tells us 164 miles per hour for Pruitt. Now, we have seen faster speeds than that, even for young Scott. It may be just the cars are starting to wear a bit and lose just a little bit of horsepower. But Scott Pruitt now heading on the back part of the course. Elliott Forbes Robinson is getting all kinds of pressure from Scott's teammate Pete Halsmer in that third position. Elliott really having to drive this car now. The tires start to go at this point in the race, and the driver, well, he is really being challenged by the vehicle and the racetrack.
This is a time in the race that really requires more of the driver's skill. There's been some oil laid down on the track now. The tires have worn a bit. It's a little more slippery out on the surface. The driver is a little more tired. A lot of heat building up in the cockpit, sitting behind those high horsepower engines. As we look back now, this is the 14th place car, 1 lap down of Paul Gentilozzi. You saw the 81 car running earlier in the race. Well, he's a lap behind the leader. Gentilozzi from Lansing, Michigan, started as a drag racer, did some driving in the Kelly Series, now in the Trans Am. Earlier, Steve took a look at number 81.
People are known to have identity crises. Well, here's a car that could develop one. The number 81 Oldsmobile of Paul Gentilozzi. You see, it's not really an Oldsmobile. It was born as a Mercury Capri built by Jack Roush for the old Trans Am series. Well, it was parked behind the shop. Gentilozzi bought it, and he likes Oldsmobiles. So he reskinned it and put an Oldsmobile engine in it and ran it in another organization's stock-bodied class. Well, he didn't like that, so he came to the SCCA, and they said, well, if you want to run it as a Trans Am, you got to put a smaller motor in it, you got to put smaller tires and brakes, and a bunch of other changes. So he did all of that. It used to be red. He painted it white for good luck, brought it here to a big, scary racetrack where he's never been, and lo and behold, he's qualified in the top half of this tough Trans Am field. So don't be telling me you need a $250,000 race car to cut it in the Trans Am. Gentilozzi proves otherwise.
Gentilozzi, number 81, currently running in 14th place.
Well, by cut it in the Trans Am, Paul, I didn't mean he can win it. I meant he can come out here and race with all these guys and have a good time. Gentilozzi is doing just exactly that. But what a race this has been. A number of lead changes. We saw Paul Newman lead it. We've seen Elliott Forbes Robinson in a Porsche. We've seen this, and we're seeing this young man, Scott Pruitt, and it's still a 3-horse race. Just beautiful competition.
Front three cars maintaining station with one another now. Pruitt in the lead, EFR running in second, and Pete Halsmer running in third. Now remember, Pete started third on the grid, dropped back to ninth, and then drove his way back to third place, but he's not been able to challenge EFR.
Now this trio has put quite a bit of distance between themselves and the 4th and 5th place runners. In fact, let's take a look at it here. You can see third place is Halsmer, and we should be seeing the Chevrolet. Yes, there's the Chevrolet car of Jim Durhag. He is running in the 4th position. Behind him, another Chevrolet. 40 is a V8, and behind him is Les Lindley in the bright yellow V6 Camaro. So Chevrolets are hanging in there in case anything goes wrong with those turbo beasts.
So Durhag, the number 40 machine, remember, normally aspirated engine, comes through turn 6 now, and we've got the radar gun on him. 65 miles an hour, so about 3 miles an hour off the pace at the slowest section here on the track of our leaders. Scotty Pruitt, EFR, have been going through here at about 68 miles an hour.
Well, hanging in there in 4th position, that tells you a lot about Jim Durhag. That's kind of where he's run throughout the series. And there's Les Lindley, the V6 Camaro. Durhag just consistently picks up points, and he is second, as I said before, only to Scott Pruitt. But the bearded Les Lindley from California out there having a fine drive today, really.
The number 8, bright yellow machine, Chevrolet powered. Chevrolet's looking very, very strong here, despite the fact that there is no full-bore Chevrolet factory support. We look back now. The race for 7th place. That is Bruce Jenner, number 42, and the still smoking Bill Doyle in number 53, and Deborah Gregg sitting just behind them. They all three fight for 7th, though the real battle is now between Doyle and Jenner.
Not to mention the battle Doyle is having keeping his engine together. What progress the Porsche people have made in just 1 year with this 944 turbo, and a lot of that credit goes to Tom Siebel at Porsche North America, who was assigned to this project a year ago. There you see Deborah Gregg. In fact, let's ride a little bit with Deborah Gregg. She is back in the 9th position, and you know, Deborah's got a hard car to muscle around this course. But Jack Roush tells me, Paul, he's very happy with her progress, and that this car has more horsepower. He has not yet given her until her abilities become a little greater and her upper body strength is greater.
Well, Bill Doyle, number 53, continues to burn oil away. I assume the corner workers have checked the car over to make sure he's not dropping too much. We take a look at Bruce Jenner's speed through the first turn, maybe 2 miles an hour off the pace of the leaders. And there is Bill Doyle, number 53. He is running in 8th place. Deborah Gregg is running in 9th right now. Car off the course, number 99. Steve, you can pronounce it.
That is Mark Peel's sticker, marked in the graph. And there's 42, Jenner, still being followed by Doyle, hotly contesting that position. And you wonder, how big a crankcase does that blue car have? Oh, and Jenner explodes the motor. No question about that one, Paul. That Porsche is coming to a halt. And the volume of oil spread out on the racetrack could bring out the yellow flag, either in that corner, or now there's a little fire burning on the side of the 42 car, but it appears to have extinguished itself. So much smoke it's even inside the cockpit with Bruce Jenner. So no doubt about that one. It will not be rejoining this race. And Jenner right now, I'm sure, is wondering how his other car is doing. Elliott Forbes Robinson running in the 2nd position in the team car to this machine. Here is the owner of the team, Bruce Jenner, trying to get out of the car. He appears to be okay. It's just kind of an awkward move crawling out of that window. And he right now will be looking for his other machine. And there it is, still sandwiched right between Scott Pruitt and Pete Halsmer. Now, will we be seeing a yellow flag here, Paul?
Well, Steve, when that engine let go on Bruce Jenner's machine, it laid down a lot of oil. In fact, you saw the results of it, that little oil fire that finally extinguished itself. In fact, Steve, if you look down to EFR's pit, the crew is now getting tires out. So they're apparently listening to some of the SCCA radio frequencies, and they've anticipated this. We now have a full course yellow. The pace car is out. We'll slow the cars all the way down, all the way around the circuit. That'll give them a chance to change tires if they care to.
And things calm down to where EFR can communicate with the crew and try to make that decision. Do they pit or not on a full course yellow? We'll be back to find out here at Brainerd International Raceway.
We're back at Brainerd International while Les Lindley comes into the pits for a change of tires. The field is under a full course yellow. That created when Bruce Jenner's number 42 had the engine let go. Scotty Pruitt still sits in the lead, followed by EFR, Pete Halsmer, Jim Derhaag, and Jim Fitzgerald. But the speeds are slower now behind the pace car as they try to get that oil cleaned off the circuit. Bill Doyle's number 53 sits by the roadside. He had the oil problem earlier, but he's out of the race with a flat tire. So the workers now try to get this course clean. And you know, a giant circuit like this has to have a lot of help, people to get the place operational. Earlier, Steve talked with one of those individuals.
There's some racing officials I meet, and I'm really envious of their jobs. I mean, really interesting. This is not one of them. Dave Watson is technical director for the Sports Car Club of America in the Trans Am Series. And this man has to somehow make all of these cars competitive. You've got 6 cylinders, you got V8, you got turbos and no turbos, 2+2s and 2-seaters. How do you do it?
Well, obviously it's an ongoing situation. This year we've had a number of adjustments as the season has progressed, and as of our last race at Mid-Ohio, we had about 5 leaders and lead changes, and it was a pretty nice race, and hopefully that's because our job is working out here. A lot of adjustments. You got to stay on top of this thing. The name of the game is race, obviously, and everybody's going faster every day, and we're just trying to keep things equal.
Dave Watson, one of the technical inspectors. That's the nice thing about Sports Car Club of America membership. You can be a driver, you can be on the crew, you can be a corner worker, you can be involved in their rally program. There's something for everyone in the Sports Car Club of America. I highly recommend it to you. We are on board the number 11 car, Elliott Forbes Robinson. What will they be doing under this yellow? Let's go to the pits again.
Is this a good thing or a bad thing for the 11 car, the yellow out?
Doesn't really hurt us. It's good. I see Elliott's keeping his tires hot, so the tires haven't gone away on him.
I notice he's weaving around out there more than anybody else. But that car, someone said, it doesn't really like to slow down and get back up to speed again.
It didn't used to, but we worked on it. It's better.
They fixed that problem, apparently. So we'll be going green quickly.
So even though they were ready, obviously EFR thinks the tires are okay. He's going to stay on the set he has. We'll be back for the finish right after this.
You don't walk very far in Brainerd, Minnesota without encountering a beautiful lake. This is Cross Lake, and on Cross, like Gull and so many of the others, there are family resorts that cater to young and old alike. There's all kinds of fishing and water skiing and backpacking, and of course for the kids, something as simple as a slide on a hot day. And here at Brainerd International Raceway, it is a hot day. We're in the closing laps. The green flag should be out momentarily for Scott Pruitt, who is leading in the Mercure, followed by Elliott Forbes Robinson in a Porsche, and Paul Newman. Paul Page has moved up to 8th spot. Apparently, they have solved some of the mechanical woes with that Nissan.
Well, Newman was the early leader, and then he had handling problems. They tried to change tires. They also discussed the possibility that the brakes weren't working in the front as good as they could. But Newman has stayed in the fight, and despite that pit stop, which came under green flag conditions, moved back up into 8th position. At the lead of this field, ready to take the green flag, car number 2 is Scotty Pruitt. Just behind him, Elliott Forbes Robinson, and then Peter Halsmer, followed by Jim Derhaag and Jim Fitzgerald. As the green flag in the hands of the starter now, it's waved, and we are back racing with just 4 laps to go here in the Trans Am at Brainerd International.
I'll tell you, this is the dogfight that everyone has looked forward to. Scott Pruitt got an excellent start coming up in turn number 10. He anticipated the green flag beautifully, and he leads this trio down into turn number 1. And between the 2 Mercures is this man in 2nd spot, Elliott Forbes Robinson. Saw it on that steering wheel as he exits turn number 1. In front of him, he sees a yellow and white Mercure. Behind him, in his mirrors, he sees another yellow and white Mercure.
The leaders finishing the faster section of the course, turn 1 and 2. Now they begin to slow down because it gets very tight here. This has been where most of the closing has occurred throughout the day. And indeed, you can see them now begin to bunch up, though Scotty Pruitt still has a bit of an advantage over the 2nd place car of Elliott Forbes Robinson. Now, let's look back in the field just a little bit. Some of the slower cars, some of the back markers, and look at this. The 38 car of Jim Fitzgerald leads a parade fighting for 5th place. That's Lindley just behind him in 6th, and in 7th place now is Paul Newman.
That's right, the teammate too, Jim Fitzgerald. Newman in the newer of the two out. Oh, and we see some smoke, and also getting a little off the track was the yellow car of Lindley, but that's nothing unusual. He's been doing that all day. But look at him moving one side and the other, trying to get around Fitzgerald.
Just in front of them as they come around, Paul Gentilosi's engine lets go on the 81 machine, and taking advantage of that opportunity, Lindley gets around Fitzgerald. Paul Newman now pulls in behind his teammate.
You know, the brake bias in these cars, Paul, is adjustable from the cockpit. Newman may finally have hit on just the right brake bias. I think that's what was holding him back earlier.
And while this fight occurs, Deborah Gregg moves up into 8th position now. So Paul Newman is chasing his teammate, Jim Fitzgerald, and the two of them will begin to do battle shortly.
Not only are they teammates, they are great friends. A constant kind of bantering goes on between them and the younger drivers, and a lot of practical jokes that I'm sure a lot of you have heard about. But right now, there's no joking matter between these two red, white, and blue Nissans. Paul Newman, who had the big top speed earlier, apparently still has it as he smokes off Jim Fitzgerald and says goodbye as he goes into turn number 1.
But not nearly as fast as he was earlier in the race. He's almost 20 miles an hour off of his pace from the early laps. But that could be a product of handling off that last turn. The turn leading to this long straight is so very important for the speed at the end of the straight.
Well, you can see there how deep Scott Pruitt drove that McCord into the turn. He waited the last second to get on the brakes, and smoke coming off of those front tires. Elliott Forbes Robinson showing him no mercy right now, as the two are just glued to one another through the twisty part of this course.
Scott Pruitt leads it, but EFR is just behind. They come through turn 6 at 64 miles an hour, so their pace there is a little slower as well. Part of the product of the tires beginning to wear.
Absolutely. I also agree with your earlier statement about Paul Newman's speed down that front straight. They're not running as fast because they can't carry that speed through turn 1 now with the track conditions and the tires. Pete Halsmer going a little bit wide, almost like he was getting a look around the first and second place automobiles. Halsmer is still in this thing for sure.
Now remember, we've had more than 90 miles of racing on this circuit. A lot of oil's been laid down, and that makes it a little tougher to handle on this circuit as well. So all of those factors affecting the overall speed here.
Pete Halsmer trying to get close enough to Elliott Forbes Robinson to get a little bit of a draft, a bit of a tow down this long front straight, but he can't do it. Elliott Forbes Robinson moving to the outside, ducking inside. Let's see what kind of a line he takes, and if it's changed from earlier. Yes, indeed, they're down real low now, Paul.
The approach to the turn, nice and wide. They both had to fight to get the nose of the car to come down and take the apex of the turn. Now, EFR moves up just behind Scott Pruitt. Pulls in right under his rear wing there. Now they drop back just a bit. Scotty gets on the brakes what appears to be much earlier than he has in this same position on the course.
And you know, you wonder with EFR's performance here if Dave Watson, who I talked to earlier, might not put another 50 pounds. Oh, and look at Pete Halsmer. Pruitt bobbled a little bit. That held up EFR, and Pete Halsmer seized on the opportunity.
Well, Halsmer anticipated something there. He'd moved all the way over to the right. He saw something, he sensed something, but whatever it was, it paid off. Peter Halsmer, who started in 3rd, dropped back to 9th, has now battled his way back up to the front and is leading the Trans Am.
Elliott Forbes Robinson right now probably can't believe what has happened to him, and Pruitt has got problems. Scott Pruitt, the number 2 car, is slowing, Paul. He has got something wrong with that automobile. Boy, how the complexion of this race has changed in about 15 seconds.
Makes you wonder if it isn't a product of radio transmissions. Maybe Halsmer knew something, that Scotty was going to have a problem. Set himself up, blew past EFR and Scotty, and now picked up the lead. Now, can EFR battle his way back? Can EFR get around Halsmer and lead this race again?
This will be the last lap of the Bendix Trans Am. The final lap of the original 33. Elliott Forbes Robinson has less than 3 miles to get around that car, and he's going to make a move right now down the front straightaway, and I think he's going to make it work, Paul.
Pete Halsmer to the outside, EFR to the inside, comes past. Halsmer picks up the lead in the first turn. Superior straightaway speed paying off there.
Oh, but he has still got 7 more turns to go to the checkered flag. Elliott Forbes Robinson, who has come so close this season and been winless. He's been second and he's crashed in those latter stages of the race. He's had little things go wrong with his Porsche. But right now, I'll tell you, only Pete Halsmer could cost him this victory.
Well, Halsmer has to be kicking himself. He had to know, because he saw it so many laps before, that was the key turn on this racetrack. And he desperately had to keep EFR behind him in that first turn. He couldn't get the job done. Now, it's almost impossible for Halsmer to get around EFR.
Well, you know, Halsmer had no defense there, Paul, other than taking them both out of the race and off into the grass. He wasn't about to do that. Elliott Forbes Robinson had just enough advantage on that square to make a good, clean, defenseless pass.
Shows you what a good and what a courteous driver Halsmer is. Other drivers might have made that race car real wide going into the first turn. He didn't do it. As a result, EFR has the lead.
Right now, Elliott Forbes Robinson probably holding his breath as he can almost see the flagman as they come down that short straight to turn number 10. Elliott Forbes Robinson in the lead. Pete Halsmer, this is his final opportunity if he's to win this Bendix Trans Am. Halsmer, can he get around Elliott Forbes Robinson? Halsmer starts to come to the outside, but he drops a wheel up, and that cost him. The checker is out. Elliott Forbes Robinson wins it.
And you got to ride right under the checkered flag with Elliott Forbes Robinson here at Brainerd. Scotty Pruitt brakes. Peter Halsmer tries to get the lead, holds it for a bit, and then drops back to second place, giving the victory to EFR.
And with the breakage on the part of Scott Pruitt and the fact that both of them passed Jim Fitzgerald, Paul Newman will pick up fifth, and just behind him, the Mercury Capri and Deborah Gregg.
Well, Peter Halsmer, as we look out the front of Deborah Gregg's car, apparently sensed a problem with Scotty Pruitt, used it to his advantage, got by in the lead, but he could not contain EFR, who came back around and won the Trans Am here at Brainerd. After an early charge by Paul Newman, Elliott Forbes Robinson drove one very smart race. And the result, a victory at Brainerd, Minnesota. We'll be back.
Salutes Elliott Forbes Robinson, the sure winner of the week. EFR, in the number 11 Porsche, held off a late charge by Pete Halsmer for his first SCCA Trans Am win of the season.
Well, the race has been run, and Elliott Forbes Robinson comes in as the winner, followed by Halsmer, Der Haag, Lindley, and Paul Newman. But let's talk with the winner, who's with Steve Evans.
Thank you very much. Well, it's about time we got one for Porsche, wasn't it?
Elliott Forbes Robinson saying it's about time. Indeed, you earned this one. When's the last time you heard of 8 lead changes in 100 miles?
I'll tell you, it was a great race. With the heat today, we were overheating the tires a little with these fast sweepers, so for some reason, it didn't heat him as much running second. You could kind of cool it a little bit, so it was good to run there for a while and then try and take the lead again.
You know, when the caution came out, your crew immediately threw some tires over the wall. You thought maybe you had one going down?
Well, what's happening is that we're getting so much buildup from the hot tires that the car wasn't holding at all, so it was really tough for the first lap there, but after that it was great.
Was that yellow beneficial for you or not?
Well, I think it made a better finish because all of us were just tiptoeing around there, and it made a good hot finish so we could run a little harder for the end.
It sure did, and I couldn't agree more. It's about time for you, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
A nice afternoon drive through Minnesota brings Elliott Forbes Robinson $10,000 for his win. EFR, one very likable man who can be very, very funny when he wants to, climbs out to accept the accolades of the crowd gathered here at Brainerd International, the winner of the Trans Am. And Scotty Pruitt, who certainly was in a position to win, now walks back through the pits. He finishes in 10th place. Let's go back to Steve with Pete Halsmer.
As you well know, it looked like for a second there when Pruitt has his problems, you were going to be able to pick up the pieces for the team, but apparently not.
Well, it didn't quite have it on the straight. I was going to try and... It was a choice of whether to stay the inside or the outside on the straight down there, and I thought if anything I'd have a better shot from the outside because I knew Elliott would be able to pull up alongside me whichever way I went. So I tried it from the outside, and I was able to almost hold it, but I've had trouble with understeer with it pushing in that corner before, and I didn't want to drive it off the outside of the track. So.
Well, it still looked to us like a fine driver, well suited to a wonderful automobile.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. I'll tell you, the Mac Tools Mercury has been a super little collie this year, and this is the first race that's come in anything other than first, and it's a second, so we'll get back on track next race, I hope.
Okay, Pete Halsmer, a nice second place.
Been a lot nicer if he could have stayed in front. The stats on this race, 8 lead changes, 1 full course caution. They averaged 99.4 miles an hour. Third place finisher, Jim Der Haag. He is now with Steve Evans.
Well, in Jim's hand, Paul, is maybe part of the reason he didn't finish even better than he did. That's the gear shift handle. When did it break off?
Lap after the restart. I just got by Bruce Nesbitt, the lap car, and I hit, I don't know, one of the gears in the backside, and it busted off and went into neutral, and I had to reach down through the boot and find fourth, and figured that was the best gear to put in, and just drove it from there.
You left it in fourth gear?
Didn't have any choice.
You know, I told you earlier, an independent Chevrolet driver would be a factor here. Boy, that's a tremendous achievement.
Thank you, Steve. You know, we guessed a little different on tires. We wanted a little harder Goodyears, and they just worked beautiful all day. We just drove the dickens out of the car all day, and I really felt we had a shot at the end. Not a good shot, but maybe a shot to, you know, to push them, and that's okay. We're happy with third.
The next time I see you, I think you'll probably have some in a heat-treated shift handle.
Yeah, we'll be talking to the guy that built this next week.
Good job again. Third place.
Thank you.
The fifth place finisher, Paul Newman, still sits in his car in what may have been the most difficult fifth place he's ever scored. Remember, he led early, and then problems with the handling of the car sent him to the pits. They worked on the car, then he drove it as skillfully as he could and got it up to fifth. Margin of victory, 34/100ths of a second. Scotty Pruitt had the fastest lap of the race, 1:39 and 47. Pruitt finished 10th. He's now with Steve Evans.
You know, Scott, maybe if you laid something at the feet of that Paul Bunyan statue in downtown Brainerd, it'd help, because this track just doesn't like you very much.
Well, at least I made it one more lap this year than I did last year. It's real unfortunate, but...
Broke a transmission, I understand?
We broke spur gear. Same thing bit me at Sears Point last year, and, you know, the guys do their best to try and give us the best car there is, and I can't say enough for Mac Tools and Lincoln Mercury. They give me a great car, and, you know, I've had luck. She's been on my side every race so far this year, and something like this was bound to happen. Unfortunately, it's really tough when it happens the second lap from the end.
You know, Jack Roush, your boss, was very philosophical about it. When he happened, he said, oh, heck, Scott's had a lot of good luck this year, too.
Well, we have had a lot of good luck, but you'd always like to win them all. Well, we gave it our best. The crew guys did a super job, and, of course, Jack Roush, the whole team, are real behind us, and we'll be back next time.
Sure you will. Thank you for all your cooperation today.
Thank you.